Welcome back. In the previous step, we set up a simple microservice for the limit service. We were able to get it running. Our eventual goal with the limit service is we would want it to connect to the Spring Cloud config server. We would want it to get the configuration from the Spring Cloud config server. Before we get there, what we'll do in this step is we would try and configure a few values in application.properties and expose a service using the limit service to retrieve those values. The first thing I would do is I would open up the application.properties and give a name to our application. So all that you need to type in is application.name. It's spring.application.name is equal to limits underscore service. As we create more and more microservices, we would want to give the applications a name so that we can easily identify them. The other thing you would also notice as we go on is we would configure a server.port. So we would configure a specific port for each of the applications. For the limit service, however, we would continue using the default port 8080. So I don't really need to configure anything. Now, what we want to create is a simple service. Let's get started with it. So let's get started with creating a simple controller. I'll say new class. I'll call this limits configuration controller and I'll press finish. Now, over here, what we want this to be is a REST controller. We want to expose a small service from here. So let's do that at REST controller. I'll import the REST controller in, and we would want to create a simple method in here. What we would want to return back is the limits configurations, or I would say limit configuration, and the method we want to create is retrieve limits from configuration. We want to configure a couple of limits and we would want to retrieve them from the configuration. So that's cool. I'd want to expose a get request, so I'll say get mapping, and let's use a URL /limits. Let's organize the inputs. I've imported the get mapping in. Right now there is nothing called limit configuration, so let's go ahead and create that. So limit configuration, I'll say control1 and I can say create class limit configuration. Go ahead, I'll use a package called .bean and say finish. Now in this I would want to put two values in, int maximum and I'll say int minimum. And over here, as usual, I'll quickly create the getters and setters first. Generate getters and setters. Let's just do the getters for now. I'll also generate a constructor. Generate constructor using fields. I want both of them because we would be using it and returning it as a return type of the REST service. What we would also need is a no argument constructor, protected limit configuration. So what we have created is a very simple bean, right? We want to store the minimum and the maximum, a couple of values, let it be the minimum and maximum for anything. It does not really matter. What we are really looking at is a couple of things. I have to also make them private. So we have a couple of simple things, int minimum and maximum, and limit configuration. I've just created a constructor and also a couple of getters to be able to retrieve those values out. That's cool. Over here, I can now return new limit configuration of, I can send the values, right? So what we said is first is maximum, the second one is the minimum. So let's say 1000 comma 1. Let's launch up the limit service application. For now, what we are doing is we are hard coding the values in. We are not really picking them up from the application.properties at all. For now, we just wanted to configure a hard coded value and see if we have everything right. When you hit the URL localhost 8080/limits, you'd see that we get a JSON response back, maximum 1000 and minimum 1. That's cool. So we have a simple REST service working. In this step, what we did until now is very simple, right? We exposed a simple REST service returning a hard-coded limit configuration back. In the next step, we will make it pick these values from a application.properties. Until then, bye-bye.